Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Hughes, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for BAI. Today, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with Dennis Gata as part of the BAI Deep Dive series on making digital transformation and lending a reality. Dennis is part of the Global Financial Services Executive Leadership Team at Infosys and is focused on bringing cutting-edge technology solutions to established financial institutions by collaborating across his professional network, including a wide ecosystem of experts, startups, and established industry players. Dennis, it's so great to be with you today. Let's go ahead and jump into the conversation here. And I thought we could start with a foundational question. Would love to know, what are the most important factors to take into consideration when building a digital transformation strategy for lending?
Thanks, Holly. Great to be here as well and look forward to the conversation. When anybody asks me about digital transformation, I start first with, what do you mean by digital transformation, right? It's a broad term. And for me, digital transformation is having an Apple-like experience, Google-like targeting, and Amazon-like fulfillment. If someone can bring all these things together, they can, really digitally transform themselves. And I think that applies to the world of lending as well, right? When you are looking at digital transformation of lending, it's about, how do we first bring in the best experience so that it's easy to apply for loans, make the process as frictionless as possible. How do you simplify the entire process of approvals, the internal processes, etc.? And then finally, for the servicing of the loans as well, how do you make things simpler and better and faster? So it's really looking at it end to end, not just the front end, but also the middle end and the back office processes to simplify the process of lending. And I feel there are two or three key areas, right? So how do firms leverage data and analytics for better targeting? How do you automate the processes for better servicing? Use cognitive learning for kind of automated underwriting and so on. And finally, really making through this digital transformation, lending as a part of kind of the lending as a service being embedded into the lives of customers so that it becomes part of the process of buying a car, or buying a house, or buying something online, and it's not a transaction that they're trying to do separately. So that's how I really look at digital transformation for lending, really making it end to end and transforming all aspects of the lending process.
Yeah, those are great points. I think sometimes people get stuck a little bit on the front end, which is certainly important, but there are definitely opportunities throughout the whole cycle. And you brought up some really, I like how you position some of those best in class people and to think about it, differently at those different phases. Certainly this is not easy work, as we know, and you work with a lot of different clients who are on this journey. Would love to know, what are some of the most common obstacles that you see banks and credit unions face during the planning or the execution, and how can they overcome them effectively?
Sure, Holly. I think, any transformation is hard, right? And I think the most important or the critical challenge that organizations face is the challenge of legacy. Systems that have been there for several decades have not been modernized, and the ability to, implement kind of new processes and new solutions on those platforms is quite expensive and time consuming. So really, kind of solving the issue of the technical debt or the legacy infrastructure becomes a critical element. But it's also beyond that, right? Even if the systems are great, as I mentioned earlier, it's also about the processes. In this sector, there is still a lot of work that happens manually. There's a lot of paper that moves around. And how do you really, look at a process? Sometimes you realize that the same process is done by 10 different people in 50 different ways. So how do you harmonize the process, eliminate some of the steps which are non-value adding, make it as frictionless, as straight through as possible, and get the best possible outcome? But I think the most fundamental thing also is, right, really looking at the entire lending value chain from the eyes of the customer, and really using the latest tools and techniques available to get the best outcomes, right? So for example, I still get sometimes offers for student loan, right? Why would somebody, send me an offer for a student loan? Why not, look at my lifestyle, my data, which, many of the banks and lenders would have, and come up with more targeted offers of what would make sense for me at the point when I'm making a decision to apply for a loan, right? So really using data as an enabler for targeting customers, and it could be structured data, unstructured data, internal, external data. That is again a big challenge for firms to really adopt that. And then finally, it's always the challenge about the mindset and the culture of the organization, right? How do you bring in the right level of agility and really that customer obsessed mindset that you do everything from the lens of the customer and drive improvement in the entire lending value chain.
Yeah, some really good points for sure, and a lot of different angles to navigate when going through this. And if we talk a little bit more about the technology side, certainly a lot of effort around the cloud in general and how the cloud is being leveraged for digital transformation. Could you talk a little bit more specifically about how you see the cloud supporting digital transformation in lending?
Yeah, and as I always say, cloud is kind of more an enabler for transformation, not the end in itself, right? And firms need to really use the inherent power of cloud to really transform the business. There's a phrase that I always use, right? Cloud transformation is not just about changing your zip code, but really fundamentally changing the application architecture and the business model. And again, that applies to lending as well. Cloud brings inherent advantages of scalability, security, resiliency, etc. So firms that are, really wanting to build those kind of world-class systems can use the power of cloud to get those benefits, right? But it really helps to, instead of lending systems being siloed, standalone applications, how can you really build lending as a platform? So using a cloud-based lending platform, how do you, look at multiple lending products on a single platform rather than having different systems, for different types of lending? How do you get into the mode of, build once but deploy multiple times, so that anytime there's a change in market conditions, you want to bring certain changes to your products, launch new products, it's easier and faster to do that. Really build the scalability, right? During the last 2 years of the pandemic, we all saw, right, certain elements of the lending business took off very significantly. Mortgage was at an all-time high, small business lending, and so on. And now some of that is starting to taper off. So how do cloud can enable that kind of a scalability? So when you need it, when the volumes are high, the demand is high, we can really manage and cope up with those volumes. And at the same time, when it goes down, you can reduce the cost by having a kind of turning down some of those systems and platforms. So several benefits of the cloud, right? Many cloud providers come up with a lot of tools for data and analytics, for automation, and so on. And again, by building lending platforms on the cloud, firms can actually leverage all of those capabilities to take applications to market faster and really build scalable and more modern applications.
Great. So let's talk about, who's doing it well out there. So you certainly work with a lot of different, banks, credit unions. You see, the landscape and what's happening. Who do you feel is ahead of the curve in terms of that digital transformation of the lending experience, that full end-to-end piece?
Yeah, I think in my experience, a lot of the regional banks we see have, used in the last couple of years on the back of SBA PPP, and then, several other initiatives that came out of that. Launched new products and new platforms on lending. But if I look at some specific examples, for example, kind of US Bank recently launched a digital lending platform that completely automates the process, right? From application to funding. And all the applications can be submitted digitally, reviewed digitally, signed digitally, and so on. That's a great example of how they've had a very customer-focused approach to improve the end-to-end process for lending. We've seen, Goldman Sachs recently acquire Green Sky to focus on, home improvement, consumer loans origination. So again, very targeted towards certain new segments which can help them in growing the business. We've also seen Blend use a lot of automation and AI, provide that as a platform to support the lending processes for the larger banks. So these are some examples that come to mind of how firms have used the power of technology to launch new lending products to make their platforms more scalable and capture the market that's out there.
Yeah, that's great. Always helpful to know, I think, some people that you can look to or get some examples from. There's certainly a lot of new competitors as well. Would love to know, your thought about new entrants into the space. Who do you think is having an impact and why?
Yeah, I think one of the main themes around lending that has caught up in the last few years is the whole buy now, pay later or point of sale lending. And several, new firms and fintechs have focused on that. There are firms like Affirm, Klarna, Avant, and many others that have really targeted that segment, right? And they have really focused on, being lending as a platform service provider so that they get embedded into the lending services provided by other companies as well. So I think those are the new entrants that have really expanded the market and also challenged the market. And on the back of that, we see several firms even outside the traditional banking and financial services industry offering lending services, right? Amazon offers supply chain lending for many of their merchants. Walmart similarly offers lending to their suppliers, and a lot of that is done leveraging, kind of embedded lending platforms that are provided by some of the fintech companies or other banking institutions. So I think that's a emerging trend as well of, lending being embedded into services provided by non-traditional financial services institutions as well. I should also mention SoFi and some of the other, emerging firms, fintechs that have really, again, streamlined the process of lending end to end and, expanded beyond traditional just student lending into multiple other lending products that they've taken to the market.
Yeah, I mean, there really is a lot going on in the space, and it's especially that point you mentioned about the embedded, lending options. And when you think about what's customer friendly and minimizing that friction, I mean, there are a lot of different things that I think more traditional banks and credit unions need to be watchful for, and I think all the more reason why this is such an important priority. So I think some really great examples for people to think about. So Dennis, maybe just one final question to close us out here. As you look at the overall landscape, where have banks and credit unions made progress in digitally transforming the lending experience? And where do you think there's still opportunities for more enhancements?
Sure. I think, there's definitely a lot of progress in kind of targeting and proactive customer engagement, using of data to generate leads, qualify leads, identify target customers, and so on. Definitely, there is a significant improvement with respect to that. I think also on the origination side, digital lending, where most of the application process can be done online and the underwriting and the approval can be done within minutes and not days. A lot of banks and credit unions are moving in that direction and really bringing in automation and AI-based underwriting concepts to improve the origination and the approval process. And then finally, from a servicing perspective, many firms are again using a lot of new technology and automation to streamline the process, reduce the dependency on manual processes or paperwork moving from one place to other, and doing it digitally, right? So I do think that in the overall lending chain, both in terms of targeting as well as origination and the servicing, there has been significant progress, a lot more still to be done. But I feel in terms of if you look into the future, really changing the business model, I talked about embedded finance a couple of times today, but that is really the future, right? And a lot more can be done there. How do you make lending as a part of the lifestyle of their customers and not as a separate transaction that they engage with their banks or the financial services firms. So buy now, pay later and other similar concepts are catching up very fast, and a lot more investment we see will be in those areas. Finally, I think the one area that really needs more focus is, really focusing on other segments of lending, right? Especially the low and middle income segment. We do see that, certain companies are leveraging technology, right? Helping, borrowers in that segment build a credit history, providing with them financial tools, financial literacy, etc., so that over a period of time, they have a good enough credit history so that they can be brought into the entire lending ecosystem, and they can make their financial lives better. I do personally think that that's a segment that is untapped. A lot more can be done there, and that also has a broader purpose of really helping the community by bringing more of the LMI borrowers into the lending ecosystem. And I feel there's a lot more that can be done there, Holly.
Yeah, so important. And I think, you've given everyone really a lot of different angles to think about, both now and the near-term opportunities and then that longer-term vision. So Dennis, thank you so much for sharing your insights on, again, what is such an important topic, I think a key priority for banks and credit unions. I think you've given everyone just, a really good sense of some takeaways that they can use as they're looking to build their own strategies and be successful with their initiatives. And thanks to all of you who are watching today. Be sure to check out the other content for this BAI Deep Dive series, and you can also visit BAI.org for more information on the key issues that financial services leaders are facing. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you, Ollie.